I'd be in violation of an injunction and I could go to jail. I ignored it. That was in 2002. 6 years later, I'm still talking about it. They've never enforced that Supreme Court writ. They've never brought me to trial.
Is that something that they could bring up, do you think, and say, look here, you've been talking about this now for 6 years, now you're going to go to jail or whatever?
But they couldn't do that because any judge would look at that and say, well, look, if you have proof that Kevin Annett is lying or libeling you, why didn't you ever enforce this injunction? Why didn't you ever take him to court?
Mm.
And they have, in 12 years of me bringing all of this evidence out, not once has any of the churches or the government come forward with counter evidence. They've never refuted it. They've never said it's not true. And under the law, when you do that, you're consenting to what's being said. You're not challenging it. So in effect, they've already acknowledged through their silence that this is all true. The question is, they're still in charge, so how are they going to be brought to trial? How are they going to be held accountable? That's the big question.
Yeah. And, what is your kind of situation right now then? I mean, are you in any contact at all with your family anymore? And
yeah.
You are?
My daughters are 19 and 16. They've grown up, and in fact, they're both really supportive. It's kind of funny. I never made a point of fighting with their mom a lot. I just told them, look, love both of us and just respect us and learn at your own time what happened. I didn't try to force them to take sides or anything. And that's really helped because now, we have really a great relationship because they can see now why I did everything I had to do. And, my ex-wife still has a very kind of unreasonable anger towards me, and not surprisingly, because she has a lot of that history that, having colluded with the church to help try to destroy me, really. A lawyer told me the other day that what she did and what they did is under the law called criminal conspiracy.
Yeah.
And that can put people away for 10 or 20 years. When you conspire to destroy somebody to hide your own crimes, that's a serious crime. And, they're all liable for that. So, no wonder people continue to try to, smear me because they have a lot to lose if this ever came out in a big way. Like, if I had $1 million and can sue all of them, definitely a lot of this would come out. And that's probably what's going to happen one day.
Well, that sounds like a good idea. Don't you think it's time to clean up some of this mess? It's been lingering on for quite a while, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm kind of in a funny position because often I'll wake up and think, it seems like me against the entire system here, and in one sense it is. But there's so many people out there who are coming forward now, a lot of Native people just on the ground, who come forward to confirm, to tell more stories. I'll give you an example to show you how the tide is changing. In Canada, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation had a TV last July. They had what they call a town hall meeting in Regina, where Native people could come in front of the camera and tell stories about what they saw in the residential schools. A woman called Irene Favel got up. She's 75, and she said when she was a little girl, there was another girl on her dorm who got pregnant from a priest. The priest had raped her. She was only 11. And when the baby was born, she saw that priest take the baby and throw it into a furnace in the basement. She was an eyewitness. And others came forward to describe how they used to hold the furnace door open when the fetuses and other kids who had died were burned up in the residential school furnace. She told that story, and the white woman who was interviewing her didn't bat an eye. She didn't have an emotional reaction at all. And nobody who was on the show even referred to it. So it's kind of like, how can you hear that story? How can you know all these children died and not respond? And yet the truth is coming out more and more. So it's kind of like, it's this huge denial, Holocaust denial really happening. And at some point, something's got to break. And one of the ways to do that, of course, is just getting the truth out more. And that's happening. So, I'm confident that it will, you can see it crumbling before your eyes in a way.
That's very, very good. It's definitely time for that. And do you want to kind of, name any names or the people that are after you kind of right now, or even in regards to companies? You mentioned like one of the big, mining companies before that, but are there anything more like that? The people that are, that are after you and have been really hard hitting in, trying to keep you away from uncovering this story?
Well, it's all sorts of officials within the United Church, that are responsible. Montague of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in Vancouver, he's kind of led the smear campaign. He hires Native people to go in and disrupt my meetings and say, oh, Native people don't support Kevin Annett. There was an insider in the RCMP who phoned me up one day and told me a lot of this stuff and eventually mailed me some things which showed that, there were informants, paid Native informants that were going around to disrupt my work. There's been out of the Public Relations Department in Toronto of the United Church, they've been leading this whole smear for a number of years. Farming out articles to the media that make it look like I'm crazy, having Native people come forward and say that they don't support what I'm doing, just kind of on that level. On a bigger level, there was it's interesting, some of the companies that are threatened by some of this work, including Camco. It's actually the biggest uranium company in the world. They do a lot of their mining in northern Saskatchewan, and right after I released a list, last April, I released a list of mass graves that are close to former residential schools. 28 grave sites across the country of where these children are buried, from eyewitnesses and other information. Some of these sites are right on the land that Camco wanted to mine. And so right after that, they sponsored a reporter to come and write a very bad article about me. Really, it was a character assassination. And they got that all over the media. But it was a reporter working for Camco. And, there's bigger forces at work. As I learned, the letter, don't forget the letter that got me fired was because I found out about this land deal going on. So I think it does come down to the question of the land and the resources and the big moneyed interests that are threatened by all of this stuff coming out.
And are the church gaining anything from this in regards to that they are actually given money, or is it just that there's so much kind of weaved in and a part of the system that this is kind of this comes with the territory in nowadays if you are involved in a church or whatever?
Well, both. Definitely, there have been direct payoffs to the church after they've given over their land to different companies. That kind of payoff I've documented in the film and in my book, Hidden from History, the Canadian Holocaust. But the other thing to remember in this is that, in Canada, there's kind of this three-headed hydra, the church, corporate sector, and the government. They've always worked together hand in hand. A lot of the early missionaries were also the local Indian agent, and they often helped set up the local timber company and that on the west coast here. That relationship is very old. It goes way back. And so the point is that they're like criminals that have done this terrible thing. They all have a vested interest in helping one another keep it quiet. And, that's definitely the case. Now, the churches, to give you an example of this measly $10,000 compensation that survivors might get, that has not come from the churches. Canadian taxpayers are putting that money forward.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the government and taxpayers that are paying off, that are saving the church from having to pay a dime for any of this. So I mean, it's just open collusion, and I think the reason the churches are being protected so much is because if they ever went on the witness stand, a lot of this stuff would come out because they were the main perpetrators. So the government is really having to protect them to, protect themselves and to stop this fuller story from coming out.
Mm. Now, Kevin, before we continue here and talk a little bit more in our members section, I do want to talk just briefly about your website, of course, and